The stranger by the firelight. The wind howled across the plains like a wounded beast, carrying dust, silence, and the scent of coming rain. The sun had long since fallen beyond the red ridges, leaving the small ranch house standing lonely against the wide stretch of the Wyoming desert. Inside, a single lantern flickered, its weak flame dancing across wooden walls marked by years of storms and solitude. Rancher Elias Ward sat by the hearth, staring into the fire as though it held all the answers to his life's questions. Once, this house had been filled with laughter. His wife, Mary, had sung by the window as she worked, and their young boy had run across the porch chasing the wind. But fever had taken them both 5 years ago. Since then, only the coyotes and the creak of old boards had kept him company. That night, as the storm rolled closer, Elias thought he heard something, a faint sound beyond the wind. A voice? A cry? He stood, hand on his rifle, and stepped out onto the porch. Lightning split the sky, throwing light over the endless dark. There, through the curtain of rain, he saw a shape moving slowly, staggering, collapsing, then trying again. A figure. Elias rushed forward, boots sinking in mud, his heart pounding in his chest. When he reached the shape, he found a young woman half conscious, her dress torn by travel, her hands scraped raw. Her lips moved, whispering something he couldn't hear. "Easy there," Elias said, lifting her gently into his arms. "You're safe now." He carried her inside, laying her near the fire. The warmth brought a bit of color to her pale cheeks. She shivered, eyes fluttering open. For a moment, she looked terrified. Where am I?" she asked in a trembling voice. "My ranch," Elias replied, kneeling beside her. "You were caught out in the storm. You're lucky I heard you." She tried to sit up, but winced in pain, clutching her arm. A bruise was forming there, dark and ugly. He fetched a damp cloth, wiping the mud from her face carefully. Beneath the dirt, her features were delicate. High cheekbones, amber eyes, lips trembling between gratitude and fear. "Thank you," she whispered. "You can rest here till the storm passes," he said gruffly, as if afraid of sounding too kind. "I'll make you some coffee." When he turned toward the stove, she watched him closely. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his face lined with years of sun and sorrow. There was a quiet gentleness about him, though he tried to hide it behind that hardened look. As he poured her a tin cup of coffee, she finally spoke again. "My name's Clara," she said softly. "Clara Dorne." "Elias Ward," he replied. "You from these parts?" She shook her head. "No, I was traveling west with a group. But things went wrong. Bandits, I think. I ran." Elias's jaw tightened. He'd seen what bandits could do. He didn't ask more. He just handed her the coffee and sat across from her. The storm roared outside, but inside the cabin, a fragile calm settled between them. Hours passed. The rain slowed, tapping gently on the windows. Clara had dozed off on the couch, wrapped in an old blanket. Elias sat silently, listening to her soft breathing. It had been years since another soul had slept under his roof. Something about her presence, fragile yet stubborn, pulled at a place deep inside him he thought was long dead. Then, sometime past midnight, she stirred and gasped softly in pain. Elias moved closer. "You all right?" he asked. "My shoulder," she murmured, trying to move her arm. "It hurts worse now." He fetched a bowl of water, gently removing the cloth he'd placed earlier. When a lantern light touched her sleeve, he frowned. The fabric was torn and soaked with blood he hadn't noticed before. "You're bleeding," he said quietly. "I know," she whispered, voice weak. "It's nothing serious, I think." Elias hesitated, unsure. "Let me see," he said. She looked at him, uncertainty flickering in her eyes. Her hand went to the edge of her sleeve, gripping it tightly. "No, it's fine," she said. "I'll be all right." "You need it cleaned," Elias said firmly. "If it gets infected out here, you won't be." The storm groaned outside again. Silence filled the room between them. Then, in a soft, almost trembling voice, she said the words that made Elias's breath catch. "Remove the fabric?" she asked. Her tone was neither command nor plea, just quiet acceptance, like someone who had nothing left to lose. Elias froze. The fire crackled behind them, throwing gold light across her face. For a moment, he couldn't move. It wasn't the words that shook him, but the trust, or maybe the surrender, in her eyes. Slowly, carefully he nodded. "All right," he said. "I'll do it careful." He reached for a small knife, cutting away the torn sleeve with steady hands. But when the cloth fell away, what he saw made him stop cold. Her arm wasn't just wounded. It was bruised, burned, and branded. a cruel symbol scorched into her skin, half-healed and raw. Elias's heart thundered in his chest. "Who did this to you?" he demanded, his voice dark with anger. Clara flinched, pulling her arm back as tears welled in her eyes. "Please," she whispered, "don't ask. Just help me forget." Elias took a deep breath, forcing his fury down. He cleaned the wound as gently as he could, wrapping it with linen. "You're safe here," he said softly. "Whoever hurt you, they won't find you." Clara met his gaze, and for the first time, a faint flicker of hope touched her eyes. When dawn finally came, the plains shimmered under a pale golden light. Smoke rose from the ranch chimney as Elias prepared breakfast. Clara sat by the window, wearing one of his old shirts, her hair braided loosely. "Thank you," she said again, her voice steadier now. "You didn't have to help me." He turned from the stove, meeting her eyes. No one should be left out there alone. But even as he spoke, he felt something shifting inside him, something he hadn't felt in years. A reason to care again. Outside, the sun rose higher, spreading light across the barren land. In the shadows, danger was stirring. Somewhere out there, men with the same cruel mark branded on Clara's arm were looking for her. And before the next sunset, Elias Ward's quiet world would burn again. The truth beneath the dust. Morning came bright and cold. The storm had passed, but its scent still hung heavy in the air. Elias stood outside the barn, tightening the saddle straps on his horse, trying to steady his thoughts. Inside the house, Clara was still asleep, or pretending to be. He wasn't sure anymore. All night he'd lain awake, thinking about that brand burned into her arm. He'd seen marks like it before, years ago, when he rode with the territorial guard chasing raiders across the frontier. The same shape, a serpent coiled around a dagger. A symbol of a gang that had terrorized small settlements along the trail, the Viper Riders. He thought they were long gone. But if Clara carried that mark, she hadn't just stumbled onto his land by accident. He rubbed his temples, exhaling through his teeth. "Lord, what have you dragged to my doorstep?" When he came back inside, Clara was up, standing by the fire in his old shirt, staring into the flames like she saw ghosts there. "You're up early," Elias said. She turned, startled, her eyes darting to his face and then away. "Couldn't sleep." He nodded slowly. "I've been thinking," he said. "That mark on your arm, I've seen it before." Clara froze. Her hands trembled slightly. "Please, Elias," she whispered. "Don't ask me about it." "I have to," he said quietly. "Because if that brand means what I think it does, then men are coming. And they won't stop until they find you." She hesitated for a long time. Then, finally, she sat down by the table, her voice low and hollow. "I was born in a camp," she began. "Not a home like this. My father rode with the Viper Riders. My mother was taken from one of the towns they raided. When I was 12, I watched them burn her alive because she tried to escape." Elias's hands curled into fists. "I ran that night," she continued. "But you can't run from blood. They found me again years later. Said I belonged to them, that I was marked by birth. I tried to fight, but..." She lifted her arm slightly. "They branded me, to make sure I'd never forget who owned me." Elias's chest tightened. The firelight flickered over her face, and he saw not weakness but steel. Years of pain hidden behind quiet endurance. "How'd you get away this time?" he asked. She swallowed hard. "They raided a freight station near the border. I took a horse and fled. I think they killed the men who helped me." Elias paced the room, jaw tight. "You should have gone east, not west," he muttered. "They rule these parts." "I didn't know," she said softly. "I just followed the wind and ended up here." Elias looked at her then, really looked at her. 4 or 5 years he'd lived in silence, trying to forget the world. But this woman had walked out of the storm with fire in her eyes and a story that burned through the walls he'd built. "All right," he said finally. "You'll stay, at least till we figure this out." Her gaze lifted, a fragile spark of hope in it. "You'd risk that? For me?" He shrugged, almost smiling. "Guess I've been alone too long. A little danger might remind me I'm alive." Days passed. Clara recovered slowly. She helped around the ranch, feeding the chickens, brushing the horses, hanging laundry in the wind. Elias found himself watching her more than he should. She was unlike anyone he'd met. There was grace in the way she moved, quiet strength in how she faced the endless horizon without fear. Sometimes, when the evening sun turned the plains gold, she'd hum an old tune her mother had sung. Elias would sit on the porch with his hat tipped low, pretending not to listen, though every note carved its way into his heart. But peace never lasts long in the Wild West. It was late afternoon when he saw the dust cloud rising in the distance. 3 riders, black silhouettes against the fading light. Elias's stomach dropped. He grabbed his rifle and went inside. Clara was at the table, shelling beans. One look at his face, and she knew. "They found me," she whispered. He nodded once. "You go out the back. Take the mare, ride toward the ridge. Don't stop till you reach the river. No, she said firmly, standing. I'm not running again. Clara. I said no. Her eyes blazed with fear and fury. I won't keep running from them. I'm tired, Elias. Either I end this, or they will. Elias stared at her, then exhaled heavily. You're stubborn as a mule, he muttered. All right then. We stand together. The riders came fast. By the time they reached the gate, the sky was bleeding orange. The leader, a thick man with a scar splitting his chin, grinned when he saw Clara standing on the porch beside Elias. Well, looky here, he sneered. The little snake thought she could slither away. Clara's breath hitched. Riker, she whispered. Missed you, darling, the man said. Boss ain't happy you took off. Said if we bring you back alive, he might forgive me for letting you slip. Elias stepped forward, rifle steady. You're not talking her anywhere. Riker laughed. This don't concern you, old man. Best move aside before we paint that porch with your blood. Elias didn't blink. You step 1 foot closer, and I'll drop you where you stand. The moment hung heavy. Then the world erupted, gunfire splitting the air. Elias fired first, dropping one of the riders clean off his horse. Bullets tore through the railings as Clara ducked behind the water trough. Riker's men circled wide, shouting curses. Elias reloaded fast, heart hammering. He moved like the man he used to be, sharp, precise, fearless. But there were too many of them. A shot grazed his shoulder, spinning him halfway. He hit the porch hard, gritting his teeth. Elias, Clara cried, scrambling toward him. Stay back, he roared, dragging himself upright. He raised the rifle again, just as Riker charged in. The two men collided, fighting hand to hand. The rifle fell to the ground. Riker swung first, his fist connecting with Elias's jaw. Pain flashed white-hot, but Elias fought back, landing a blow to the outlaw's ribs. They grappled in the mud until Clara, trembling but determined, grabbed the fallen rifle and leveled it. Let him go, she shouted. Riker froze, then slowly turned toward her. You won't shoot me, he said, grinning. You ain't got it in you. Clara's hands shook, her breath ragged. Memories flashed through her mind. The fire, her mother's screams, the brand searing her skin. And then she pulled the trigger. The shot rang out across the plains. Riker fell, eyes wide in disbelief. His body hit the mud, motionless. For a long time, no one moved. The wind whispered through the grass. Clara lowered the rifle, tears spilling silently down her face. Elias got to his feet, breathing hard, and took her by the shoulders. It's over, he said softly. You're free. But she shook her head, staring at Riker's body. No, she whispered. They'll come for me again. For us. Elias looked at the horizon where the sun was setting, painting the sky in fire and blood. Then we'll be ready, he said. Weeks later, the ranch was quiet again. The scars of the fight had faded, though the memories lingered. Clara stood by the corral, watching the horses graze. She wore a clean dress now, the one Elias had found in a chest that once belonged to his wife. Her arm was healing, the brand hidden beneath a white bandage. Elias joined her, carrying 2 cups of coffee. You still think about it? He asked. She nodded slowly. Every night. But it feels different now. Like it belongs to someone else's story. He smiled faintly. Maybe that's how healing starts. She turned to him, eyes soft. You saved me, Elias. Twice. He shook his head. No, Clara. You saved yourself. I just gave you a place to stand. A silence settled between them. Gentle, comfortable. The wind brushed through the grass, carrying the scent of sage and rain. Then Clara said something that made his heart catch. When you removed that fabric, she whispered, I thought you'd look at me with pity. But you looked at me like I was human again. Elias's throat tightened. You are, he said quietly, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, Elias stood on the porch, watching her light the lantern inside the house. For the first time in years, his home didn't feel empty. He remembered the night she'd arrived, cold, broken, branded by cruelty, and how far she'd come since. The world outside was still dangerous, but for now, there was peace. He smiled faintly, whispering to the fading light. Maybe the good Lord knew what he was doing, sending her here. Behind him, Clara stepped out, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders. Elias, she called softly. He turned. Come inside, she said with a smile. It's getting cold. He followed her in, the door closing gently behind them, shutting out the wind and the ghosts of the past. Outside, the stars began to bloom across the sky, bright, endless, and free.